Welcome to Reddit Reveals. Listen along, enjoy the ride, and drop a comment later. Even a short one means more than you think. She came home with her hair wet. That was the first red flag. It hadn't rained in over a week. She walked in through the garage like nothing was off, tossed her keys in the bowl by the door, and headed straight for the laundry room without saying a word. No, hey! No, I'm back! Just the sound of the washer door slamming shut. That's what set me off. I walked in there, leaned on the doorway, and just watched her load the machine like she was scrubbing away the evidence. I said, "You smell like hotel soap." She froze. That half second of silence told me everything I needed to know. She didn't deny it. She just scoffed, like I was being dramatic, and said, "I spilled a drink. Had to rinse off. At 11:30 at night." Quick pause. While you're listening, tell me which country or city you're watching from. 3 hours earlier, she'd left the house in jeans and that deep-cut top she only wears when she wants free drinks. She said she was grabbing one quick drink with a friend from the gym. I asked which friend. She said, "You don't know them." Real convenient. I'd let it slide, even though something about her tone made my stomach twist. I played it cool. I made dinner, did the dishes, didn't even text her once, but I didn't go to bed either. So when she crept in just before midnight, soaked hair, no bra, and smelling like cheap body wash and mint mouthwash, I knew full well she wasn't at any bar. She tried to act normal, told me I was being paranoid, said I was acting insecure again. Classic deflection. I just stood there while she fed me those tired lines like I hadn't seen this movie before. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I just nodded slowly and walked out of the room. 15 minutes later, I was shoving clothes into a suitcase. Not folded, jammed. I grabbed my toothbrush, my chargers, and the documents from the file drawer. She didn't say a word. She just sat on the bed with her arms crossed, waiting for me to calm down like I always do. But I didn't. I didn't stop. I didn't sit. I didn't give her an inch. I zipped the suitcase, grabbed my truck keys, and walked straight past her like she wasn't even there. She finally stood up and said, "Where are you even going?" I said, "Well, far enough that I won't have to hear another lie from you ever again." And I meant it. I hit the highway going 80, with no music, no GPS, and no idea where I was headed. It was just me, my beat-up Silverado, and a silence so heavy it felt like someone sitting in the passenger seat, breathing down my neck. My phone buzzed 3 times in the cup holder. I didn't look. She didn't deserve a reply. I took the first exit I saw and ended up at some 24-hour gas station outside Abilene. I filled the tank, grabbed a hot dog I didn't even want, and stood in the parking lot under a busted light pole, eating it like a guy who just found out the last 10 years of his life were fake. I didn't cry. Not because I'm too tough, but because I think I already did all my crying months ago. Just never admitted what I was really mourning. It wasn't love anymore. It was habit. Routine. Pretending things were fine because breaking everything apart seemed harder than living a lie. But the second I saw her come home like that, hair wet, face smug, voice steady, I knew she wasn't scared of losing me. That's what broke me. Not the cheating. The fact that she didn't even try to hide how little she cared if I found out. Around 2 a.m, I parked behind a Motel 6 and sat there staring at the red vacancy sign flickering through my windshield. I still hadn't answered her. 15 missed calls. 7 texts. The first few were fake sweet. "Baby, please, can we talk?" Then they turned bitter fast. "So you're really just leaving? You're acting crazy right now." And finally, the guilt trip. "This is why I can't talk to you about anything. You always run." That last one made me laugh out loud. Like I'm the one who just walked in dripping hotel soap. I booked a room in cash, room 214, and sat on the edge of the bed for a while holding my wedding ring. I didn't even remember the last time we made each other laugh. I couldn't recall the last time she reached for my hand, just to hold it. You don't realize a marriage is dead until it's been cold a long time, and you finally smell the rot. She called again around 3. I turned the ringer off. I laid there staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the little signs I missed, or maybe ignored. The girls' nights that kept getting longer, the locked phone, the sudden gym obsession, the way she'd sigh when I walked in the room like I was interrupting her peace. The truth is, I didn't leave the city just because she cheated. I left because I'd already lost her, and staying would have meant losing myself too. At 5:42 in the morning, just before the sun came up, I checked out of the motel, climbed back into the truck, and pointed it west. I wasn't sure where I'd land. I didn't have family nearby, and the only real friend I had moved to Arizona years ago. But I figured sleeping in my truck with peace of mind was better than sharing a bed with a stranger wearing my wife's face. By the time I crossed the state line into New Mexico, I'd already tossed my wedding ring out the window somewhere along Highway 84. It didn't feel like some dramatic movie moment or anything. It was quiet. No music, no speech, just the soft ping of metal bouncing on pavement and disappearing behind me. Honestly, I expected to feel free after that, or at least lighter. But I didn't. I just felt stupid. Stupid for holding on so long. Stupid for letting her take up that much of my life, my money, my time, my sleep, and still coming out of it looking like I was the crazy one for leaving. I hit a diner just outside Clovis. It was one of those places that looks like it hasn't been remodeled since the 1970s. Vinyl booths, sun-faded Coke signs, a waitress who called me honey before I even sat down. I ordered pancakes and coffee I didn't really want, just to have something to do. I must have looked rough because she asked me if I was coming or going. I told her I wasn't sure anymore. She laughed, but I wasn't joking. That's when my phone buzzed again. I'd left it on silent, but I checked it anyway. 38 unread messages. 10 voicemails. Some of them were from her sister, who I hadn't heard from in months. Others from her best friend, trying to quote 3 what happened, like I was some idiot who needed closure spelled out in slow, simple sentences. But the one that caught my eye was a short message from her that just said, "We need to talk. I'm pregnant." Now, listen. I'm not one of those guys who jumps to conclusions. But when your wife disappears for hours, comes home smelling like soap from a hotel bathroom, and then the next morning drops that text like a bomb, you'd have to be out of your mind not to think something's off. I didn't answer. I just sat there staring at the screen, letting the pancakes go cold in front of me. My chest felt tight. Not from sadness. No, that part of me had already shut down. What I felt was rage. Not the screaming kind. The quiet kind that simmers under your skin and makes your hands shake without warning. If she was pregnant, and that was a big if, it wasn't mine. We'd barely touched each other in months, and she knew that. So why drop that text now? To scare me back home? To make me feel responsible again? To guilt me into staying in a marriage she'd already trashed? I stood up, dropped a 20 on the table, and walked out without a word. I didn't even finish my coffee. Back in the truck, I stared at the dashboard for a long time. Engine off, fingers drumming the wheel. Part of me wanted to call her bluff, ask for proof, demand answers. But the smarter part, the one that had been ignored for way too long, knew better. I'd already seen the truth in her eyes that night. I didn't need a paternity test to tell me I'd been replaced. So I did what I hadn't done in years. I turned the phone off completely, and I kept driving. By the time I rolled into Roswell, the sun was coming up behind me, orange bleeding through the dust-streaked windshield. I hadn't slept. My head felt like it was full of broken glass. But I wasn't tired. I felt wired, like my body was running off leftover adrenaline and 10 years of pent-up rage. The phone stayed off. I didn't even want to know what kind of damage was waiting on the other end. At that point, I figured whatever she had to say, it wasn't for me. It was for the version of me she thought she could still manipulate. I checked into another cheap motel. This one had green carpet and a TV that only played static on half the channels. I dropped my bag, took a shower so hot it burned, and stood there under the water for a long time, just letting the silence wrap around me. No arguments, no guilt trips, no pretending like I was okay. That room might have smelled like bleach and cigarette smoke, but at least it was mine. At least I didn't have to lie in that bed next to someone who looked me in the eye and said, "I'd never do that to you." I laid down, finally trying to rest, but of course my brain didn't shut up. I kept thinking about the last few months. The way she started spending more time at spin class, how she kept flipping her phone face down, how she used to call me on lunch breaks and then just stopped. I remember one night she left the house to grab milk and came back smelling like tequila and someone else's cologne. And like an idiot, I told myself, don't be paranoid. I wanted to believe her more than I wanted the truth. That's the part I can't get over. Not what she did, what I let her do, over and over. Around noon, I walked across the parking lot to a diner attached to a gas station. I sat at the counter and ordered eggs and hash browns, but mostly just picked at them. I must have looked rough again because the guy 2 stools down kept glancing over like he was trying to figure out whether or not to ask me if I was okay. I wasn't, but I nodded at him anyway like everything was just peachy. When I went to pay, I noticed a young couple sitting in a booth near the window, laughing, holding hands, totally locked in with each other like they were the only 2 people on the planet. It wasn't even jealousy I felt. It was grief. Grief for the version of us I thought we were supposed to be. Grief for the life I thought I was building with someone who was just killing time until something better came along. Back at the motel, I plugged my phone in and turned it on. Not to call her, but to check my bank account. And just like I expected, there it was. $236 gone. Charged that morning, spa service, in our hometown. So while I was sleeping in a motel off a New Mexico highway, my wife was getting a massage. That was the last straw. Not the cheating, not the lying, not even the fake pregnancy text. It was the calm. The casual way she just went about her day, while mine was falling apart. Like I'd never mattered at all. I spent that entire afternoon staring at the motel ceiling, wondering if there was a version of this story where I could have done something differently. You know, gone to marriage counseling, fought harder, checked her phone earlier, called her bluff the first time she came home at 2 a.m., smelling like bourbon and lies. But the deeper I dug into that hole, the more I realized how stacked the deck had been from the start. She never wanted to fix anything. She wanted out, and she just didn't have the guts to say it. So she pushed until I was the one who snapped, just so she could play the victim when it was all over. I got up around 5 and walked the length of the parking lot, just pacing in the heat. There was a gas station across the street, so I went in, grabbed a Gatorade and a bag of beef jerky, and stood there for a solid 5 minutes before I realized I was just delaying the inevitable. I had no job lined up, no plan, no one to call. My whole life had been built around someone who now treated me like a stranger that owed her something. When I got back to the room, the phone was lighting up again. This time, it wasn't her. It was a number I didn't recognize. Local area code. Something told me to answer. And I wish I hadn't. A guy's voice came through the line, calm but low, almost embarrassed. He said, "Hey man, I know this is weird, but I think we need to talk." I asked who it was. He gave me his name, Derek, and said he didn't know me personally, but he'd been seeing my wife on and off for a while. Said he didn't know she was married until he saw a picture of us together that she had half hidden in a kitchen drawer. He sounded nervous, like he was expecting me to start screaming. But I didn't. I just sat down on the edge of the bed and listened. He told me she said we were separated, that I had emotional issues, and that I was too controlling, which made it hard for her to live freely. According to him, she'd been staying at his place some nights, driving my car, and even using my Netflix account while she was at it. That's when something in me just went cold. I thanked him for calling. Not because I appreciated it, but because I needed him off the phone before I said something I'd regret. After I hung up, I didn't throw the phone. I didn't punch a wall. I just sat there completely still, like my body had shut down, and all that was left was this weird hollow buzzing in my head. She hadn't just cheated. She'd rewritten the entire story, turned me into the villain, built a whole second life off my name, my money, and my silence. And she would have kept going too if I hadn't caught her that night. Hair wet, ring still on, walking through our front door like she hadn't just burned everything to the ground. I sat there in the dark. No TV on, no lights, just the hum of the motel air conditioner. And for the first time since I left, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that feels like it got poured straight into your skull with ice water. No more spiraling. No more waiting around to see what she'd say next, or what excuse she'd cook up. I wasn't going to play defense in a game I didn't sign up for. I was done reacting. Now I was going to move. I pulled out the little spiral notebook I kept in the glove box. The same one I used to write down oil change mileage or groceries I always forgot to buy, and started making a list. Not a wish list. Not a revenge fantasy. A plan. Step 1. Lock her out of the bank accounts. Step 2. Cancel the shared credit cards. Step 3. Contact a divorce lawyer. The real kind, not the cheap ones with billboard ads and cheesy slogans. I wanted someone who'd bleed her dry the way she'd bled me. I checked my account and saw that she'd made another charge overnight. $70 at some brunch place back in our city. She was out there sipping mimosas while I was eating microwaved eggs and jerky in a roadside motel. And she still hadn't stopped using my money like it belonged to her. That did it. I called the bank, got everything frozen, and transferred the rest into a new account under my name only. I opened it using a branch locator I found on my phone, one town over, small enough that she'd never think to look there. Then I did something petty. I logged into our shared streaming accounts, Netflix, Hulu, even that trash reality show subscription she loved, and changed all the passwords. Not because it made a big difference, but because I wanted her to feel the door slam. I wanted her to know I wasn't just sulking in a motel room. I was erasing her one password at a time. Around noon, I got a text from her mom. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She wrote, "I don't know what's going on, but she's scared. She said you disappeared. Just please call me before you make any big decisions." I almost laughed. Now she's scared? After months of lying, sneaking around, turning me into the villain? I stared at that message for a long time before deleting it. I wasn't going to sit through a lecture from the woman who raised the narcissist I married. I didn't owe her closure. I didn't owe anyone anything. And that's when the second call came in. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until something in my gut told me to pick up. I did, and it wasn't her. It was Derek again. His voice was low, and this time, he wasn't calm. He said, "Hey, I thought you should know. She showed up at my place last night, drunk, screaming. Said you cheated on her. Said she kicked you out." I didn't say a word. He continued, "I didn't let her in. I told her to go sleep it off somewhere else. Look, man, I don't want to be involved in this anymore. I didn't know what I was walking into. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just dishonest. She was dangerous. She wasn't just twisting the story to feel better about herself. She was actively rewriting reality and handing it out to anyone who'd listen. I hung up without saying anything. There was no point. I sat down on the edge of the motel bed, looked around that dusty little room, and knew I couldn't stay in limbo. If I hesitated for one more second, she'd find a way to spin this whole thing, drag me back in, and make me feel like I was the one who needed forgiveness. Not anymore. The thing about people like her, they never expect you to actually leave. They count on you staying just long enough for them to reset the narrative. Cry a little. Say the right mix of apologies and gaslighting. Swear it was a mistake while subtly blaming you for why they made it. And I'll admit it, she'd pulled it off before. Not this bad, not full-blown infidelity, but little things. Half-truths, lies of omission, late nights that weren't a big deal, and flirty texts she swore were just jokes. I always forgave her, not because I was weak, but because I was in love with who I thought she was, but now I knew better. That version of her never existed. I was halfway through packing my bag again when a knock hit the motel door. 3 quick taps, sharp and confident. I froze. Nobody knew I was there. My phone had been off for hours. I looked through the peephole. It wasn't her. It was some guy in a gray polo, maybe mid-40s, holding a manila folder and wearing that fake calm expression people get when they're about to deliver bad news. I cracked the door, but kept the chain on. "Can I help you?" I asked. He nodded once, professional but weirdly sympathetic. "You're Nathan Garrett?" My stomach dropped. I didn't answer, just waited, like, "I'm a process server." "This is for you." He held up the folder and slid it through the gap in the door. "You've been served." That's right. She beat me to it. Inside the folder was a petition for legal separation. Not divorce. Separation. Filed in our county the following afternoon. I flipped through the papers in silence, reading phrases like emotional abandonment and marital neglect. She was painting me as the one who left. Not just physically, but emotionally. Like I'd checked out months ago, and she'd been trying to hold the marriage together. The whole thing read like a bad fiction novel. She even requested temporary spousal support, said she couldn't afford rent without my help. I sat down on the bed, that buzzing in my skull returning full force. She didn't just twist the knife, she filed paperwork with it. While I was out here running from the wreckage, she'd already started building a case. The speed of it told me one thing. This wasn't panic. This was planned. Probably for weeks, maybe months. For the worst part, I wasn't surprised. Somewhere deep down, I'd known she had it in her. I just hoped she wouldn't go that far. I stared at the papers in my lap, heart racing, but hands steady. She wanted a legal separation instead of a divorce for one reason, so she could keep the narrative vague. So she could tell people, "We're just working through things right now," while still dragging my name through the mud behind closed doors. It gave her room to keep lying, to keep the sympathy flowing in her direction. I didn't waste time. I grabbed my phone, turned it back on, and called a lawyer. One I found through a friend of a friend. Someone who specialized in scorched earth divorces. No mediation, no apologies. Just results. I told him everything. The cheating, the lies, the fake pregnancy, the money she'd spent behind my back. He didn't flinch, said he'd handled worse, and that we'd file by the next morning. After I hung up, I felt something I hadn't in days. Control. Not over her, she could rot in whatever fantasy she was building, but over my own future. I wasn't going to sit back and let her rewrite our story with me as the villain. She'd started the fire, and now I was bringing the water. 3 months later, I was living in Flagstaff, Arizona, with a better tan, a better apartment, and zero contact with the woman who tried to wreck my life. The divorce papers went through faster than I expected. Turns out when you drop a stack of screenshots, bank statements, and texts from the guy she was cheating with in your lawyer's lap, things move quick. I didn't just file for divorce either. I went for full financial protection, froze joint assets, shut down shared cards, blocked her from my insurance, and pulled my name off everything tied to her name, like I was disinfecting my life. She fought, of course, tried to drag me back in, claimed I was ruining her future, and said she deserved support. But her lies couldn't hold up once my attorney laid it all out in court. The judge didn't buy her emotional abandonment fantasy for a second. In the end, she walked away with exactly what she brought into the marriage. Nothing. No support, no settlement, just her lies and the mess she made. Karma didn't stop there either. Turns out her boy toy, Derek, wasn't exactly the savior she thought he was. A buddy back home, who still works at the same gym she used to lie about going to, told me Derek dumped her 2 weeks after our court date. Apparently, once she couldn't cover her half of rent and started turning up drunk at his place again, he realized she wasn't this sweet, misunderstood wife, just a manipulator with zero self-control and a warped sense of loyalty. Even better, she tried to get her old job back, some HR admin gig at a local real estate firm, but they restructured her position. Probably heard the gossip by then. Small town, people talk. Her reputation started to follow her like smoke after a fire. Can't hide from it. And me? I started fresh. I got a new job doing digital print design for a local business in Flagstaff. Simple work, good people, no drama. I hit the gym for real, started eating better, even picked up hiking. Yeah, I know. Real cliche. The newly divorced guy finding himself. But honestly, who cares? Cliche feels pretty good when it means peace and quiet. I still get the occasional text from numbers I don't recognize. Probably her trying to sneak in from a new phone, pretending to be someone else. I don't answer. I don't even read past the preview. She got her drink with a friend. I got a clean break and a new life. And in the end, I didn't need revenge. She did it to herself. What would you have done if your spouse tried to flip the story and blame you for their betrayal? Let me know in the comments and hit that subscribe button for more stories like this.